the Skylark GS.
When Buick released the Grand Sport in 1965, it was a rush-to-market product to compete with the GTO. You got to remember that Pontiac literally caught everybody asleep when they came out with the GTO, and everybody scrambled to come up with a car or a package similar to the GTO. Buick's version was called the Grand Sport. It was based on the A-body, just as the GTO was. It had a little better trim package. It was based on the Skylark model, a little better trim package.
Muscle cars are made by putting big engines in lightweight bodies. In Buick's case, that body was the Skylark. It was budget priced compared to the bigger Buicks, but it had the full range of options, trim, and luxury items found on most of their high-line cars. Where most intermediates might look and feel a little economical, the Skylark always felt like a bigger car.
The interior on this model could be purchased with all vinyl or with the cloth and vinyl, and this is the cloth and vinyl, and it's held up very well, and so it looks just like it did when it came out of the shop in '65. A little more attention to detail and a little more attention to style.
Buick also had the other component they needed, the 325 horsepower, 401 cubic inch Wildcat engine. The 401 was a bit long in the tooth by now, tracing its roots all the way back to 1953. But in a 3,500-pound car, it had enough oomph to get the job done.
The Buicks were affectionately known as nailheads because the valves were so small in diameter. So the car was at a distinct disadvantage right from '65 until the late '60s.
The old nailhead 401 was not developed as a performance engine, but it had to have a lot of torque to get these big cars down the road. Well, the younger guys found out that it also do pretty good wheel spin, and that made for a pretty impressive display at the drive-ins on Friday and Saturday night.
A friend of mine in '65 his dad had a '65 Grand Sport, and we used to love to get it out on the highway. It had 2-speed automatic in it, and it wouldn't come out of low gear, which is first gear, until 105 miles an hour. We had a lot of fun with that one, too.
All Grand Sports were built on the Skylark convertible frame, a more rigid, heavy-duty chassis than the hardtop frame. The Grand Sport option package also contained upgraded brakes and suspension, wide tires and wheels, and those all-important GS badges everywhere. The GS option added $200.53 to the cost of your Skylark in 1965. And since the GTO and the 442 had been so successful with a little over-the-top marketing, Buick's ad men tried a little hot rod advertising of their own.
The '65 Skylark GS was a big departure for Buick, and so was the advertising campaign that the car appeared in. The '65 ad called the Skylark GS a howitzer with windshield wipers. Buick knew the market they were going after.
Buick sold 15,780 Skylarks in 1965, roughly 1/4 the number of GTOs sold that year. In a company like GM, though, where success is measured by selling hundreds of thousands of cars per year, it was plain to see that Buick's main emphasis was still on the big luxury models. The GM Intermediates were due for another redesign in 1966, and muscle car buyers flocked to the showrooms. The '67 Grand Sports could have been called more of the same, only faster. With minor trim changes, the '67s looked like the '66s, but there were major developments under the hood. The nailhead was gone. For 1967, Buick's engineers rolled out their brand new 400 cubic inch engine. Still following the decades-old Buick philosophy of producing horsepower at low RPMs, this engine was rated at 340 horsepower and 440 foot-pounds of torque at 2,800 RPM with a single 4-barrel Rochester Quadrajet carburetor. The 2-speed Buick Super Turbine 300 automatic transmission was finally laid to rest, replaced with a much heavier-duty turbo-hydromatic 400 3-speed. The standard rear axle ratios were still the very Buick-like 278 with the automatic and the 323 with the 4-speed, assuming you could get a 4-speed, that is. Don McIntosh found out just how difficult it was to get a Buick GS with a 4-speed transmission.
I went to every Buick dealership in Atlanta trying to buy this car, and no one had one on the lot, and no one would special order it for me. They all said that they couldn't order a 4-speed car. I was willing to put money down on it, and finally came to the last dealership. My last hope was D.L. Claiborne, and it was far from my house, but the young salesman said he'd be glad to take my order, and I knew exactly what I wanted. As a matter of fact, they even had an order filled out.
The redesign of all of GM's intermediate cars for 1968 caught everyone by surprise. Buick reasserted their luxury and high style heritage, and sales showed the GS to still be a popular car with fans of going fast luxuriously. Jack Holding's 68 Grand Sport convertible is a rare example of luxury appointments and full-on performance options.
It's quite a unique car in the sense that it has a 4-speed transmission, which Buick made very few of. They only made 2,454 Grand Sport 400s in that year with factory air and 4-speed. It has factory air.
26,345 people slapped down the close to $4,000 sales price, and those that ordered liberally from the option list for things like 4-season air conditioning, power windows, and all the other creature comforts pushed their final drive-out price into the stratosphere. After all, we're talking Buick here. This was no stripped-down economy car.
It has an AM/FM original radio, an AM/FM 8-track, a speed minder. This car may be really more unique than actually was recorded.
With a GS, you could have all the luxury options and still have all the power you wanted.
The car is phenomenally powerful. It's we like powerful cars, and you just have to watch yourself because with the 4-speed, the wheels will just spin with it.
But the big news for the Grand Sport wasn't the new skin in '68, it was the new heart in '69. If you thought muscle cars had been a big hit with everyone up until now, 1969 hit you like a runaway freight train. Out on the street, it was a nightly game of King of the Hill. Buick had been holding up its end of this game for the past 3 years and doing quite well, even though GS owners still had to put up with people constantly asking them, "Hey, what kind of car is that?" Buick solved this identity crisis with a large dose of marketing hype and muscle to back it up.
People would pull up alongside of me all the time and think this was an Oldsmobile or a Chevelle or whatever. And finally, when I tell them it was a Buick, they say, Buick, you know, and then when we would run, they understood that the car was a lot faster than they ever imagined.
In March of 1969, Grand Sports with a Stage 1 option package started appearing in the showrooms.
The GS 455 Stage 1 was unlike anything that had come before. One of the magazines of the day said that if you put GTO sheet metal on this thing, you couldn't build enough of them.
The Stage 1 option was the source of all this extra horsepower. A new camshaft and a tricked-up Rochester Quadrajet provided much better breathing on the intake side, and a shot of cold air came from a new hood with cold air intakes plumbed directly to a new air cleaner. On the exhaust side, 2 1/4-inch dual exhaust pipes ran all the way out the back. And a very un-Buick-like 364-to-1 axle ratio was standard in the Positraction rear end. Buick claimed just a 10-horsepower increase with the Stage 1, from 340 to 350. But in actuality, it was quite a bit more than that. Buick kept right on with their philosophy of building engines to make good, usable street horsepower. The Stage 1 was a perfect execution of that philosophy. Word travels fast on the street, and very soon everyone knew about the Stage 1s. If you lined up against one of these, you had your work cut out for you. Stage 1 400s propelled the GS to quarter-mile times in the low 14s on street tires. On slicks with open exhaust, high 13s were a done deal. And if you could find any speed parts for the Buick engine, mid to low 13s were right there. The problem was there wasn't any speed equipment being made for Buicks.
Performance parts were not available for Buicks. The only thing that Buick offered over the counter was the camshaft and the heads.
This car has a Stage 2 engine upgrade on it. The Stage 2 engine upgrade was a dealer option that was purchased over the counter. It ups the torque on the engine, which was 510 pounds to start.
And with the Stage 2 heads, which were some beautifully engineered, beautifully designed heads that flowed exceptionally well, all of a sudden you've got a Buick that's going out on the drag strip and just cleaning house. It was not unusual to see these cars in the 13s with just a little bit of tweaking.
1970 was a watershed year for the auto industry in America, particularly for those building high-performance cars, which was practically everybody. The lid had blown off on engine sizes. Ford had their Boss 429, Chrysler had their 426 Hemi, Chevy had their 454, and Pontiac, Buick, and Olds each had their own version of the 455. And you could still get premium gas for around 30 cents a gallon. It was the best of times. In 1970, the Wildcat engine was punched out to 455 cubic inches, and the Stage 1 heads and the other GS goodies were added.
The Grand Sport really came alive was in 1970 with the advent of the 455. Here was an engine that put out 510 foot-pounds of torque. I mean, this thing had more torque than a Hemi.
The Stage 1 455 was rated at 360 horsepower at a typically conservative 5,000 RPM and produced an astounding 510 foot-pounds of torque, the most torque of any American production car ever. This was the ultimate Buick muscle engine.
Several years ago at Muscle Car Review magazine, we did a series of shootouts between Stage 1 Buicks and Hemis, and it became one of the liveliest competitions that we ever had in the magazine. And putting those two cars on the track together and watching them just take off, it was an unbelievable display of horsepower and torque.
Even with the Stage 1 455's astounding performance, the magazine writers called the car a sleeper. Buick owners wondered, what do we have to do to get some respect around here? So after 5 years of building Grand Sports, hundreds of thousands of cars sold, Buick finally got into the image game. They called it the GSX, and it was a bona fide, in-your-face road rocket.
Image was a big part of the muscle car scene, and the Buicks to this point had been very sedate. Tame colors, low-key badging on the exterior, but with the GSX, that changed. Big satin yellow paint job, big spoilers, bright wheels, big hood scoops, loud stripes. This was unlike any Buick that had come before.
The GSX was probably one of the best packaged and balanced muscle cars that came out of Detroit. Not only did it have a pretty intensive graphic package and a small wing in the back, it also had better suspension, and that was one of the things a lot of people overlooked, was how well engineered the suspension and brakes were on the GSX. So as where a lot of companies were putting graphics or pop art decals and what have you on the car, Buick was putting some serious engineering underneath too, and you really have to give them credit for that.
Like the GTO Judge, the GSX was an appearance and performance option to the base Grand Sport. The first thing to go was all the corny Buick side trim and the fake portholes. Next, they opened up the wheel wells to accommodate some serious rubber. An entire aerodynamics team went to work designing a rear spoiler for the GSX that not only looked cool, but actually worked. In 1970, nothing said muscle like an outrageous paint scheme. So the GSX was offered in just two colors at first, Saturn Yellow or Apollo White. The car's graphics featured a broad black stripe running from the front fender down the flank of the car and up over the rear wing. A blackout hood treatment with an 8,000 RPM hood tack and G6015 Goodyear polyglass rubber were standard. Collectively, the entire package made the statement, I'm for real. Other than the wild paint and graphics and the GSX badges in the grille and on the rear quarters, no other identification appeared on the car's exterior. Not that any was necessary. The GSX set an all-new standard of brand identification among American muscle cars. Still, the Buick standard of quality and luxury was there. Along with the stripes, the spoilers, and the wide wheels, the GSX enjoyed the reputation of luxury associated with Buick's top-of-the-line cars. As the performance decades came to a close in the early 70s, gone were most of the really exotic high RPM cars. But the 71 Stage 1 455 with lower compression still had the power to create 13-second quarter miles. At the same time, conspiracy was afoot in the land. Its target, the American muscle car.
Three things contributed to the death of the muscle car. The Arab oil embargo, where OPEC shut off the spigots, the ever-tightening insurance industry regulations on muscle cars, and the emission standards that all cars had to meet now. They turned into distressed merchandise overnight.
But nobody would ever consider a Buick distressed merchandise. Despite its performance, Buick's heritage was quality and luxury, and there were advantages to not being so bold.
The Hemi Cuda, I really wanted one bad, but I found out that the insurance was going to cost me $1,200 a year, and this was back in 1970. I couldn't hack it. It was $257 a year for this.
All over America today, people come out to appreciate these great muscle cars. It's a chance for them to relive their youth and pass on to the next generation a piece of history.
I think, first of all, you've got to like cars and have some interest and be able to do some of the work yourself. And basically, it's a labor of love. Once you start a project like this, you just got to carry it through and not try to rush the project. This one took 30 months. It was done mostly on the weekends in my garage, and I didn't try to press it to get it done in any special amount of time, but I wanted it done right, and I wanted to find the right parts, so I'd wait until I got the right parts before I'd finish the project.
Perhaps because they were such sleepers, or because Buick never built them in very great numbers, or perhaps because they were just such fine automobiles. Today, Grand Sports are more than muscle cars. They're classics.
I think that the 70 Grand Sport Stage 1, I think the GSX, are two very, very popular cars, very, very good restoration candidates, and I think that they will continue to appreciate in value.
Steve Schlater found this 71 convertible, and he and his father restored it to original condition.
The car sat for many years, it had the top down, it stayed in the garage, it was garage, and it was used basically as a storage bin. Looked at the floor pans were in, excellent condition, bottom of the doors were in real good shape. Had a little bit of rust on the quarters, which is typical for a Buick. Went through the motor itself, just blueprinted it, put it back to stock. And our goal was to get it done for the Buick GS Nationals, which was in the 1st of May. We broke the motor in on the way down there, and we won first place in the 1971 Buick GS convertible class. Getting out, driving it, and being able to mash the accelerator down and just feeling the noise, the wind, it's just what a feeling, You get a lot of attention with the different people looking at it. It's just a blast.
The GS was a wonderful contradiction. Awesome speed and opulent luxury. The kind of car only Buick could build. Buick's guarantee never changed. If you drove a Buick, you drove class. Like they said, wouldn't you really rather have a Buick?
Jamie, you can't really read the eye, but it's there. Trust me. Trust me. You're gonna go raise some shit. I've been doing this for years, man, and still not very much tread there. This stuff is going to be all ass tonight. I'm tired of going that puppy. You betcha. Awesome. No doubt. Yeah. There's one full. I'm really weird on this side. Okay, pull up here.
The WD-40 is one on it. Yep. How do you do? Straight on the tire? That was squeaky.
Okay.
I didn't do that well. That made some decent.
Whoa, that WD-40 made her dig in pretty good up.
Morning, Cook Kevin.
We could just call steering pump.
Great shootout between the Buick and maybe next month they do a Buick and a Ford of some kind.
The Buick Grand Sport, 1970 model. 72 Buick Trans Am on the right-hand side, Gary Grillo.
Buick didn't build many performance cars in the 60s and early 70s, but when they decided they needed a muscle car to enhance their somewhat stodgy image, they didn't mess around. The GS Stage 1 is quite possibly the most feared muscle car ever built during that era. Argue with me if you wish, but believe me when I say this is one bad Buick. We're here today with John Chamberlain. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
John's the owner of this 70 GS Stage 1, perhaps the ultimate sleeper, perhaps the baddest muscle car ever built. John, this is quite a piece. These Buicks were really understated cars.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Dennis. I was going to say understated myself because that is so true on these cars. This car is a typical Stage 1 car that came with, perhaps a column shift, understated paint, vinyl top, and this car has all of those. It's a bench seat car.
Triple brown.
Triple brown, sure. This car is unrestored. It has the original paint still on it, the original vinyl. The interior is still original. It had that luxurious vinyl that was
luxurious
famous
vinyl.
back then.
And it does have that sort of anti-look to it.
It has an anti-look or a grandmother look, depending on how you would want to look at it, sure. Interestingly enough, this car did come with a few essentials that every Stage 1 car should have, in that it has the factory gauges and tachometer, and the sports steering wheel is a nice addition and things like that. Power steering and brakes, no air conditioning or anything like that. So,
but that's a good point. This is an original car. This is a survivor.
It is, absolutely is.
It's all original, including the engine.
Yes,
and let's have a look at that engine.
Okay, sure.
The Stage 1 monster. GS 455. Now this was only rated at 360 horsepower when it first came out.
That is correct.
That's baloney.
It is. NHRA refactored these cars to 400 horsepower after they were introduced, after they saw what kind of numbers they were turning.
But the real story on this engine is also its torque, though. It's
very high torque.
It's a torque story. It's 510 or
510 at 2,800 RPMs.
And these scoops were active.
They were. This car had vacuum that came to these scoops that kept them closed until acceleration. And as soon as you floored it, of course, your vacuum would go away, and the scoops would open up and send cool air in from the scoop area here into the engine.
Your foam pieces even look original.
They are. They're almost 30 years old, too.
So this was a hydraulic cam and only 10-to-1 compression ratio.
Yes, 10-to-1, actually about 9.8-to-1. Hydraulic, single hydraulic cam, quadrajet carburetor, cast iron intakes, cast iron exhaust manifolds. Really nothing magical about it at all.
Except that they would flat out fly.
Except they would really go. Absolutely would.
Well, we're here on a strip at the Mid-Michigan Motorplex, and what do you say we zip down it a couple times?
I think that's a great idea. Let's go do that.
Okay. John, this thing sounds serious. Remember, don't kill the host, okay? All right. It's too bad we don't have feel-o-vision, because the inertia is incredible when this thing kicks.
Sure is.
It's like you're just sitting here, and then all of a sudden it's like this. Woo!
Too cool, huh?
Yeah, too cool. That'll put you back in the seat. Actually, put you back in the back seat. The other thing that's interesting about this car with the hydraulic cam is just how smooth it runs. I mean, you can lope along.
It really is. It has, it makes all its torque at a low RPM. And, with a hydraulic cam, of course, you can go wild on a hydraulic cam, which a lot of modified versions do, but you really don't need to for this application. Yeah, and I drove it an hour and a half to get here, and if we don't tear it up around those 12-second passes, I hope to drive it back home.
Well, I respect that, too. Drive it to the track. Race it and drive it home.
Well, those days are kind of going by the wayside in light of, if anything else, the year of the car. It's 27 years old now.
Yeah.
Things can start going wrong, especially when you turn in the kind of numbers that this one will.
Light them up. Here we go. You ready? Come on, Keith. Come on, Keith. Get those lights. Break the beam. Come on. Wait a little bit farther. That's it. Okay. Heavy red line. Heavy left the red eye. Look, heavy stuff. We got him. You done it. Hey, so good. That's right. Okay, then. or 8 in the second. Tell them to put the paper back in and rerun it. Yeah, that's what you guys think about this? Check the car. You have a Ray Barton Heavy here. You think you have a Ray Barton Heavy? You have a Ray Barton Heavy. You think you have a Ray Barton Heavy here, man? If I was a Ray Barton Heavy, I'd be doing 10 seconds, man. Hey, you want to see a Ray Barton engine, man? We'll bring it down, man. And bring the fastest Buick, not that one.
Guys, let's not get into an argument.
What do you want to run? Come on, it's just 2 out of 3. Let's do it.
Hey, Ryan, you won? Just 2 out of 5, man.
You won, Ryan. You won, man. 2 out of 3.
Hey, you guys. Listen to me good. It's not a
12 per hour is exactly the same. Hey, the mile per hour is exactly the same. Come on.
miles per hour is the same, but ET's coming.
You had traction control. Don't be baited. He's got 2 chances left.
Listen, you guys. Forget it.
Johnny.
You guys won. Listen, you guys. You want to tear down engines? Let's go. You want to tear down engines? Different flows.
Come on, you guys. It's the way you work on your car. Your car's running. That's Ray Barton motor. You can't say
It's not a Ray Barton motor, man. This car came from the museum to run here.
Come on, be sports.
You're bringing me a race car?
You told us there's half a dozen witnesses that you say, wait, reborn it for me.
Wait, the big winner. Hemi's pumped out. Better luck next time.
148 miles per hour.
Somebody got to go home and do their homework.
They just have to go home and make new excuses.
There you go.
That's July and
Come on. They're going to lose, Johnny. They're going to lose.
Okay, ready? Yes, sir, ready. Eh bien, the Hemi de Philip Paranizis and the Morsaline de Hemi. And for Dwayne Diabo, the GSX Buick. Le match race, on a beaucoup de supporters des deux côtés. Et dans le 1920, c'est parti. La lumière rouge pour la CUDA, il est red light, 065 pour la CUDA. Et le Buick, non. Le Buick, par une longueur d'avance. Au quart de mille, le Buick 16. Dwayne Jabot from Kanawagi and the Buick, and Philip Paranizis from Montreal. De Montréal contre Kanawagi, donc c'est sa voisine. Eh bien oui, sa voisine s'est séparée juste par le pont Mercier. Et on se place sur la ligne maintenant. Lequel, le match race, on a beaucoup de supporters des deux côtés. Et dans le 1920, c'est parti. La lumière rouge pour le client, il est red light, 065 pour le couleur. Et le Buick, now, le Buick, fallait nous regarder avant. Au premier, le Buick Cruise 01, bravo pour le Buick. Au Buick Park
À 535, 1635, el problème pour la Mustang, à 70 miles per hour. C'est parti, de notre moteur, et on vous l'appelle.
Kicking things off with the Chevrolet Monte Carlo SS, with more definition for its muscle than ever before, at least in its new limited edition form called the Aero Coupe. The Aero Coupe has lower drag and better high-speed stability than more modest Monte Carlos, giving Chevrolet an advantage on the NASCAR racing circuits. A certain number of these special bodies has to be sold to the public to race them on the track. Chevy did that last year, but only in the southeast and midwestern states. This year, anybody can buy an Aero Coupe in white, black, silver, or burgundy. But for the look of a stock car, you give up some convenience. The Aero Coupe's trunk deck lid is shorter than other Monte Carlos, so it's tougher to get things in and out. Aside from the bodywork, not much else here is different from the formal SS. The engine is still a 5-liter high-output V8 with a true 4-barrel carb. It makes 180 horsepower with 225 pound-feet of torque, which gives the Monte impressive, if not breathtaking, performance in the quarter mile. We got 16.6 seconds with a speed of 81. 0 to 60 was also quick at 9.4 seconds. Sure, IROCs and Corvettes will do better, but the average SS buyer is a family man now, so the SS ride is fairly smooth and the handling fairly nimble, far more stable than any muscle car of old. Inside are the same kind of appointments that come with the name Monte Carlo and the pretense of personal luxury. But the SS Aero Coupe also has neatly packed gauges to keep you up to date on its muscle tone. And the price for the Aero Coupe? $13,751 base, and our car came to just over 16 grand with most power and convenience options. As for Pontiac, this loaded 2+2 will set you back nearly $18,000, all of which proves that muscle comes at a premium these days. The 2+2 is a muscle car for drivers who don't want to sweat. Based on the Grand Prix, the 2+2 rides smoother than the Chevy and comes with almost every luxury item standard. Of course, it still has that too big for its shirt sleeves look and an even smaller trunk opening, something that won't bother people as much as the 2+2's engine. It's anemic at only 150 horsepower. Over at Oldsmobile, there are no new bulges for their mid-size bodybuilder, the 442. In fact, Olds designers have smoothed the 442's lines a bit, and this year's car gets composite headlamps. But if you haven't been keeping up, the 442's 5-liter got a new cylinder head design back in 1985 for cleaner combustion and more power. The total now is 170 horses, which puts the Olds just behind the Chevy in straight-line performance. The last car in our tag team doesn't have a V8 engine or aeroback bodywork, but that doesn't keep the Buick Grand National from being the most muscular. Power comes from Buick's 245 horsepower 3.8-liter V6 turbo, equipped with an intercooler that lowers the temperature of the intake charge. When the intake gases are cooled, they contract, and the more they cool, the more you get packed into each cylinder. So when the air is cool outside, the engine makes more power inside. On this 85-degree day, the Grand National covered a quarter mile in 15 seconds at 90 and 0 to 60 in 7 seconds. But when the temperature drops to freezing, you lop nearly a second off the quarter mile and twice as much from 0 to 60. Yes, that means the Grand National is faster than the Corvette, making it the fastest production car in the USA, but only for the northern half and only for half a year. And we should note that in 1985, we put a very well-tuned Corvette automatic through the quarter mile in 13.9 seconds on a 70-degree afternoon. Regardless of the temperature, there's always more power available than the tires can handle, which makes the Grand National the biggest show-off of GM's muscle-bound set. But it's also the most graceful in the turns. Sure, there's front-end plow, but body lean is limited. And with its V6, the Buick carries less weight on its nose, so it feels more agile. Inside, the Grand National gets lots of gray to go with the exterior black, but the chrome they left off the outside is now on the inside. You won't forget that this fastest car in the USA was built by a luxury car division, since for gauges, all you get are these tiny bars in the corner for boost and revs. Base price for the Grand National is just over $14,000, and our car totaled just under $17,000. To save a few dollars, you can order a Regal Sport Coupe with the same suspension and engine as in the Grand National, and you'll have more of a choice of color, too. This brings us to the end of our GM montage of muscle, but not to the end of the story. Since the midsize models are selling so well, GM just might keep them around through 1988 and maybe 89 for the Monte Carlo, which should give their engineers plenty of time to build up the brawn of the upcoming front drive replacements.
Taking a large sedan and turning it into a fire-breathing monster is a truly American phenomenon. But with more American cars going to front-wheel drive, the rear-drive muscle car is becoming an endangered species. But rather than let the muscle car fade quietly away, Buick has decided to send their Regal-based Grand National out with a bang. The result is a limited edition called the GNX. And this car looks just plain mean. The Buick GNX, all black, without a hint of chrome, defines everything that's big and bad in American street muscle. But aside from fender ports, its appearance varies little from the Regal Grand National on which the GNX is based. It's what's inside that really sets the GNX apart. Here, the 3.8-liter V6 has been given a larger turbocharger and a modified intercooler. There's also a new exhaust system and engine computer chip. And the cylinder heads are ported and polished in true hot rod style. The result is a thundering 300 horsepower and 380 pound-feet of torque. That's a 55 horsepower boost over the already impressive Grand National. That produces a car capable of 0 to 60 times in the 5-second range and a top speed of 124 miles per hour. The suspension is also modified, and massive Goodyear Eagle tires are fitted to the 16-inch alloy wheels. Even with the improved suspension, though, the GNX is still happier going straight than going around corners. The interior is standard Grand National, with one important change. That Regal's poorly designed instrument cluster is replaced here with a full set of Stewart Warner analog gauges, the kind hot rodders use. And as we're sure you've guessed, all this muscle is expensive. $29,290 is Buick's quoted price to secure one of the 500 being built for them by ASC and McLaren engines. But we hear some dealers are demanding well over $40,000 for one. Buick has certainly done an impressive job of saying goodbye to their beloved Grand National. And as swan songs go, the GNX has to be one of the loudest ever.
Tonight, in part 4 of his Supercar series, Joe tells us the major car companies are turning out modern-day muscle cars with very different techniques.
Just another assembly line, right? But this is strange. The car starts off here fully assembled. When it leaves, it's a Buick GNX, probably the fastest production car in America. It runs the quarter mile in 13.5 seconds, faster than a Corvette, nearly as fast as a Porsche 911.
And a car like this, it kind of lends itself to the past, but it also has a sophistication to make it sure that it goes fast and safely today.
Buick's doing it with the help of ASC McLaren, a company that specially customizes ordinary cars. Here they take an already fast Buick Grand National, add a bigger ceramic turbocharger, larger tires, flared wheel wells, and a rear-end torque assembly that transfers nearly all the power directly to the ground. In the old days, manufacturers would do this on their own assembly lines. Now they commonly turn to outside suppliers. Dodge did it by shipping its Daytona to the California shops of race car driver Carroll Shelby.
One of the things we can do with an outside supplier like Carroll is to have him develop some of these things outside the normal system where he can do it not only cheaper but also quicker for us.
Through the normal corporate bureaucracy, Buick would have taken 5 years to build the GNX. McLaren did it in 1.
Oh, no doubt there's an appetite for these cars. The limited edition of 500 vehicles is sold out, and people are still trying to bid on them at $60,000 a piece. But the fact is, a lot of automotive experts think that this car, marketed by Buick, is all wrong.
What value has Buick got to go out and build a super high-performance car that in many ways puts down the Corvette, puts down the Trans Am? That's not Buick's image.
Wangers has been advertising cars since the early 1960s. He thinks the GNX is good, but he thinks Buick is missing the staid, middle-aged buyers who have always been its bread and butter.
It would be a marvelous product if it was a Chevrolet or a Pontiac.
He says the real crime is that Detroit is making great cars, but marketing them badly. In the case of Oldsmobile, Buick, and Ford, by pouring millions of dollars into racing efforts. As for Dodge's Daytona,
under-promoted. They got a magnificent product. It's, as I said before, it's the only car I can think of that the product is way out in front of the advertising and the marketing.
But the people who build these vehicles are quick to point out the spin-off benefits.
Buick's standpoint here is to show technology. You can show technology in luxury cars as well as in sports cars. And what they've done here is very commendable. And more people are talking about Buick because of GNX.
The question is, can you pay for it? If the rising price of 80s performance still has you eyeing 60s wheels, I'll have some tips for finding them tomorrow night. Joe Bell, Channel 2 Eyewitness News.
And while we're talking money, we understand those GNXs go for only $29,000.
Power under the hood costs big bucks, I would imagine.
Big bucks, yeah.
What's the Jetfire got that's so new and different? Watch. That's what. New from Olds. Only from Olds. Jetfire's got the sensational power and acceleration of the revolutionary turbo rocket engine, a turbocharged fluid-injected V8 that gives you true high compression performance. In this phenomenal engine, turbo rocket fluid, gasoline, and air are blended in the exhaust-driven compressor. Accelerate sharply, and the turbocharger whirls at incredible speed, packing the fuel mix into the engine. Result, compression zooming upward, and that enormous surge of Jetfire power. Behind this breakthrough in performance, intensive development and testing, harsh probing, merciless testing. Proving out the industry's most important engine advance since Oldsmobile's first rocket engine. Now, the Turbo Rocket, only fluid-injected, turbocharged aluminum V8 in America, found only in Jetfire by Oldsmobile.
When I drive down the street, the people all gather round, and they gaze in wide wonder at the car I have found. 200 horsepower, no time for chrome. They can tell right away that it's bad to the bone. Buick Regal Grand National Coupe. Bad. Wouldn't you really rather have a Buick? When I drive down the street, the people all gather round. They gaze in wide wonder at the car I have found. 200 horsepower, no time for chrome. They can tell right away that it's bad to the bone. Bad. Bad. Bad to the bone. Buick Regal Grand National Coupe. Wouldn't you really rather have a Buick? down the street, the people all gather round. They gaze in wide wonder at the car I have found. 200 horsepower, no time for chrome. They can tell right away that it's bad to the bone. Bad. Bad. Bad, bad to the bone.
Buick Regal Grand National Coupe. Wouldn't you really rather have a Buick?
It used to be that a power tune-up consisted of changing the jets in the carburetor, modifying the accelerator pump, and altering the advance curve in the distributor. But about 1981, all that changed because along came something called ECMs, electronic control modules, computers, if you will, on our cars. And it has frustrated performance enthusiasts because we have no longer been able to power tune our cars to meet our specific needs. But now all that has changed, thanks to something called a power chip. Today, we're in Memphis, Tennessee at Hypertech to learn about this amazing new device. And I want you to meet Mark Heffington, the founder of Hypertech and the developer of the power chip. And exactly what does Hypertech do, Mark?
Steve, we take advantage of the late model cars' computer control systems. We dyno tune the engines, and we store that information in a tiny microchip that fits in the car's computer.
Okay, how does a chip control the engine's performance? Any chip?
There's sensors mounted all over the engine that measure air mass flow, throttle position, oxygen content in exhaust gases, various temperatures and pressures, and they send all this information to the ECM. This is a typical ECM removed from the car. So the information from the sensors comes into the software, the computer program in the ECM, and it looks up at that point the correct values for the fuel injector and the distributor timing and sends that information back to the engine. So all you have to do to change the engine's tuning is to pull out this stock data chip and put in a power chip.
But how do you know what engine tuning information to put in your power chip?
That's the fun part. Come over here and let me show you something. This is our dyno room, Steve.
And a nice one it is, Mark. Let's see, we got a cast iron Chevy 350 V8 with a tune port injection late model Camaro.
That's right, Steve. This is just one of the many popular engines that are available today that we've tested on our dynamometer and developed data chips for. What we do is we start at like 1,500 RPMs and we optimize the air-fuel ratio and the spark to get the most power possible. And then we move slowly up the RPM band to different RPM settings and duplicate that procedure. And when we're through, we've got the best fuel curve and spark curve for the best possible wide open throttle power curve. The next thing we do is we go and sit down at the computer terminal and attempt to design a chip that will give us, when it's installed in the ECM, exactly the same power output we got on our dynamometer.
Well, can you show me how you actually get that tuning information onto the chip that you plug into the ECM?
Sure. Let's go into the computer and I'll show you how that works.
Mark, that might as well be Chinese to me. What are we seeing here?
Each of these little numbers is one data point. This particular 4K chip has 4,000 such data points. Now, a particular string, say this region right here, maybe 30 or 40 numbers in this region controls full throttle spark. Another section down in the chip, a string of numbers might control the boost on that Buick Turbo, for instance. And what our job is to do is to sit down and redesign these sections of the data chip so that we produce the same output in the engine that we got on the dyno.
And once you've done that, you just burn that into a chip and go back to the dyno?
That's right. We keep this small unit here for R&D purposes, and we can burn this design into that chip in about 30 seconds, and we're ready to test it.
But does the dyno really give you all the answers you need?
Well, it's necessary but not sufficient. We have to have it in developmental procedure to develop the chips. But when we get through, the real test is to go out and put it in the car and see what the performance gain is. Recently, we took our Buick GNX out to the Memphis Motorsports Park to test a new power chip. After we installed the fifth wheel road test system, we made a baseline run with a stock chip for an average of 1364 on the ET at 100.22 miles per hour. We brought the car back to the starting line and changed the chip. It takes a few minutes to change the chip. After you pull the kick panel down, exposing the ECM, all you do is remove the cover, pull out the stock chip, and plug in the power chip. In addition to maximum power tuning, we program our power chips to delay the torque converter lockup. This eliminates all jerkiness and results in smooth part throttle transmission shifting for everyday street driving. Once again, we made several runs, and the average ET dropped by 0.43 seconds to a 1321, and the miles per hour climbed almost 3.5 miles per hour to 103.68.
Mark, those results are pretty dramatic. Are they typical?
Yes, they are, Steve. The Chevy Eurosport is even quicker. We now have 4 chips for each particular car. 1 for daily street use for extra power for passing, pulling trailers, pulling up on the ramps, and 3 for off-road competition use.
You know, from what you've shown me today, that ECM or computer is not the performance enthusiast enemy like we thought it was. You don't even get your hands dirty now.
That's right. Dyno tuning up a car has never been easier.
This isn't your car here, is it, Tim?
You wish. No, it's over here.
Hey, what is this? This looks like a whole racing truck or something.
Boy, that's interesting, isn't it? That's a nice looking truck, isn't it?
Wait a minute, Tim. Tim, this looks like an Indianapolis pit crew or something. These guys look like...
Ignore them, they'll go away. Don't look at them. Don't make eye contact.
Is this your car?
Yeah, the same Mustang we used the last time we did this.
Wait, Tim, this looks a lot different than a stock Mustang.
Well, I made a few simple modifications anyone can do in their home for safety's sake. A few simple modifications, Jay. My wife drives this. You know, she wanted the...
This is your wife's car?
Yes.
Tim, this isn't really fair. You know, I just drove my wife's car to work today too. I feel bad. I can't compete against this.
That's too bad, Jay. You don't want to do it. We won't have to do it.
No, I guess we can do it. Let me show you my wife's car. It's a 6-cylinder Buick Grand National.
But Jay, this is a dragster. This is a professional drag.
No, it's just a V6 Buick with an extra turbocharger.
This is your wife's car?
Just a few simple modifications.
All right, let's get going. Yeah, your wife's car.
Tim Allen, 159 feet. Jay Leno.
6-cylinder just can't beat horsepower, Jay.
Hey! Wow!
Hey,
Champagne, roses.
This is fun. Girls, you know, I was just thinking something. What if our wives are watching this?
Oh my God, they're gonna kill us. We're ruining their cars! Tim, I know you gotta run. Thank you very much.
Inside drag racing. You know, pro street cars are normally a humongous engine tucked down into an ultra-lightweight car to go very fast and stay street legal. However, we found a 1983 Buick Regal that has an entirely different approach. This is the 83 Buick Regal of Lawrence Conley from Humble, Texas. But believe me, there's nothing humble about this car. Lawrence, this Regal doesn't have a 3.8 V6.
No, sir. We upgraded to the Buick High Performance block, which is a 4.1. This is an honest 272 cubic inch 6-cylinder.
But you did a lot more things, too. It's a single turbocharger, but not the stock one.
No, sir, it's not. We put a manly-sized turbocharger on it, kind of tweaked it up a bit, and here we are.
How about the onboard computer? A little different touch there.
Right. Precision Engine and Turbo provided a DFI computer for me, a sequential system. We have the capability of totally programming the fuel curve, the timing curve, and all the cold start and operating parameters in the car. Another nice feature is we also have the capability of recording the parameters during the run. When we come back after the run, we see where we were, where we need to make a few changes to optimize the performance and reliability of the piece.
It's unbelievable that you only have 272 cubic inches, and the thing must weigh close to 3,000 pounds.
The car through the Flowmaster exhaust system weighs 2,905 pounds. This motor puts out about 1,300 horsepower.
Well, at 3,000 pounds and 272 cubic inches, the list of accomplishments on this car is truly incredible. But the greatest accomplishment so far has to be the ETs he's turned so far this weekend at this NMCA event. He's gone an 811 at over 170 miles per hour, and he predicts that he'll break the 180 mile per hour barrier and dip into the 7-second zone before the weekend's out.
Did Skip had a rough night last night? Yes, just like somebody else. We can't beat the price with it. We're both trying to work our way through elementary school, so we need to find it. Okay. So, your stuff, Ryan, visit Skip and his little photo booth. Is that the back of it? He's using the back of his truck to display out of, is he not? Or he's got a table set up with a display with the Landy Dodge that's here, by the way. Beautiful Dick Landy car. And it looks like a Grand National. It's definitely not. It has engine modifications. Watch it ride. Suspension system from the factory. Watch what kind of time this runs at. It's a 231-inch V6. Against him is an obviously modified Mustang that's running with us in our King Street class. And the GNX, ladies and gentlemen, that is flying. That's 231 cubic inches.
Our junior stock class is one of our most exciting classes that we have. It takes the new generation 80s Grand Nationals and competes them against the 1970 versions of the muscle cars, such as the 69 Ford Fairlane and the 70 Plymouth Cuda. These cars are allowed to have soft compound tires, aftermarket rims, bolt-on traction bars, different gear ratios. They are also allowed to run an aftermarket carburetor and intake manifold of the driver's choice as long as it fits underneath the stock unmodified hood. You can also run a set of headers, but the headers must be connected to an exhaust system with mufflers. The exhaust must go at least to the rear axle or out to the side of the car. And you can do any camshaft change that you would wish to run in this class. Well, Dan, coming up, we've got first-round eliminations in this exciting junior stock class, and it's going to be the Holland brothers over in the Budweiser lane out of Huntington, Tennessee. They're in the 1968 AMX that you see on the screen now.
Well, they're going to take on their neighbor out of Memphis, Tennessee, Eddie Sutton, in his 69 Dodge Dart GTS, 383 cubic inches worth.
Well, look at this, Dan, one of the closer races of the day. It looks like Holland may have a bit of an advantage as they go to the three-quarter track.
You're right, it is a close race, but Holland pulls it off, 12:48 to a 13:66.
Good effort out of both cars.
Well, coming up now is going to be John Chamberlain out of Edinburgh, Pennsylvania, in his 70 Buick GS, 455 cubic inches, the Stage 1 edition.
He's up against Gregory Niepart out of Goshen, Ohio in the 1969 Dodge Dart. Dan has got a 383 big block, but it looks like he's suffering for power right now.
Definitely something must have happened to him on the line, because Chamberlain is walking away with this race. As he goes through the lights, look at this, 12:30 at 108.86 miles per hour. Well, coming up now in an 86 Buick Grand National 231 V6 edition, it's Lawrence Conley out of Humboldt, Texas.
His opponent, David Edwards, out of Hopkinsville, Kentucky, a 1970 Chevelle 396 with a 325 horsepower rating.
Well, I'll tell you what, Conley, one of the many Grand National drivers of the day, has the advantage. They come off the concrete.
Dan, it doesn't look like the Chevelle can catch him from here.
No, it doesn't. Conley with the big win here, 12:14 at 111.91 miles per hour.
To lose an effort of 14:43.
Jeff Church, also up in a Buick Grand National, the V6 edition. Church out of Alliance, Ohio, a mechanic by trade.
His opponent will be Larry Fleming out of Franklin, Kentucky in the 1969 Dodge Coronet RT. Look at this, Dan, 426 Hemi.
This ought to be an interesting race, Mike. 231 cubic inches of V6 up against the big Hemi. And it looks like the Grand National, again, with the advantage off the line. So evidently they're finding the right numbers as they come off those trees, and it looks like he's going to have a set of right numbers at the end of the race. He does, 13:15 at 101 miles per hour.
Great race there.
Well, Greg Booth, also up in the 87 edition of the Grand National. Greg out of Louisville, Kentucky.
Dan, a real interesting story in the Budweiser lane. Again, it's a car owned by Larry Fleming. This time it's Robbie, his son, at the wheel, out of Franklin, Kentucky. And look at this. The 70 Plymouth Cuda that he's driving does have the advantage at the half track.
But watch this Grand National come on at the end, Mike. He is awesome. 13:43 on the win to a losing 13:83.
What a surprise for the Fleming team. Up now, it's Bruce Gammon out of Columbia, Missouri in his 1971 Chevrolet, Monte Carlo, Dan, SS 454.
Well, if you like Grand Nationals, you're going to love this. J.C. Brown out of Liberty, Kentucky, his 87 Grand National with the big advantage right here.
Well, I tell you, the Buicks are really having a great day in this stock, in the junior stock class.
Definitely 1285 on the win. They can't believe it either, Mike.
Up now, Dan Larson. He's in the 1969 Chevy Chevelle, a 396, 325 horsepower rating. He's out of Bonus Heights, Maryland.
Well, his opponent, Jim Rorabaugh, out of Fort Mill, South Carolina, in a 1970 Buick 455 GS, 350 horsepower in this car.
Well, it's a 4-speed in the Budweiser lane. Looks like he's having problems right out of the gate, Dan.
He definitely did, as that Turbo 400 just didn't miss a lick as they make its way down the racetrack. Rorabaugh with a big, big advantage, and he's up through the lights, 1271.
That's a good race right there. Up now, Frederick Monet out of Tupper Lake, New York. Long way from home for this guy. 1963 Chevy Impala. It's a red with a 327, and it's a 4-speed car. And again, that lane seems to be giving problems to these cars with 4 speeds.
Well, I'll tell you what, the Winston lane, no problem for the 87 Buick Grand Nationals. This one, Lloyd Tarter, hometown boy out of Bowling Green, Kentucky, wins it 1296 at 104.16.
Well, the Impala really not in the hunt on this one. Still gives it a valiant effort. Goes through at a 1972. And now, Rodney Gaylor out of Lebanon, Ohio, is in his 73 Chevy Z28. He's in the Budweiser lane. Look at this, Dan. Right out of the gate, he brakes. It's also a 4-speed. Could be a U-joint or a clutch problem there.
Well, Dan Gillums has no problem as he picks up the win at an incredible 14:37.